So Rangers continue to grab the headlines in football. Mark Warburton sacked, as most people should know by now, in slightly unusual circumstances. Currently third in the SPFL, some 27 points behind Celtic. A lot of Rangers fans seem to be quite happy that the decision's been taken, looking to cut ties after the club's name's been getting dragged through the mud a little bit, James. A number of managers being linked, some top managers, Frank de Boer, for example, Giovanni van Bronckhorst, and others some slightly lesser known lights. And obviously you've got the likes of Alex Mcleish, been there before, not like great spells in the Premier League, as I'm sure Villa and Birmingham fans would attest. And then of course you've got the likes of Gary Rowett. And I guess the question is, I'm going to post the panel, obviously we all come from an era of watching football when Rangers were a superpower in world football. And the question is really, can they ever get back to that? And how do they go about that? And particularly is now a crux point for the club. And in terms of this next appointment, is that how they shape up in the coming years. I mean, James, where do you stand on the whole thing at the moment?
So I liked Warburton as a manager, and I think generally people in England have got quite a high valuation of him because he did really well at Brentford. But complete respect to Brentford, it's a different animal going to Rangers. And what seemed to happen with him there is that there was rumblings that he was quite sort of sensitive about it. Like, well, I think when you're in that, Joey Barton was saying it, and it was taken as a quote when it all. He was on 5 Live afterwards. He was saying like people were claiming I'm like Ronaldinho, but the point he was trying to make was that it's such a goldfish bowl there. There's so much pressure on it. There are two teams that are far and away beyond anyone else in size, and so him stepping into that. We're talking about on the Arsene Wenger when we're talking about kind of that journey and going on that road. You win the league into the Premier League. It all looks rosy, and they beat obviously Celtic in the semi-final as well. And then this year the expectations were. I don't think they were expecting them to maybe finish above Celtic, but there was a hope I think that they were going to challenge. And what's happened is, I mean, they're currently third as we're speaking about it, and there was always going to be a bit of a gap between Celtic and Rangers, but there's not been enough of a gap between Rangers and Aberdeen and Hearts because they've got a lot more money to spend than those guys. So I like Warburton. It seems as though as well that him and Frank McPartland, I think in 2015 it was with Fulham that he was looking to. It looked as if they were sniffing around to get out and get that job back at Fulham. And then on this occasion, it seemed like the writing was on the wall and they were trying to get out again with Forest. The whole thing's been really, really messy. But from where they go here now, Rangers they need to reevaluate where they are as a club because the names that they've gone for, like you were just saying, Gary Rowett, Tommy Wright, who's at St Johnstone, Derek McInnes, Alex Mcleish, Billy Davies, then Frank de Boer. We had a poll on our Twitter and 43% were saying de Boer. Of course, but can you get him? Yeah, exactly.
But here's the thing, Baz. They've got to looking at Celtic. I think for the first season back in the top flight, when Celtic have just been there the whole time, I do wonder whether the mentality. It's fine when you're going up through the leagues and everyone's got this focus on get promoted. Aren't we brilliant? And we've had this conversation before. You get to win games when you're in a lower division that wow, this is great. The feeling's all there. We have it as Liverpool fans, and I think you probably have it to some extent as well. They've gotten back into looks like they've gotten back into the Premier League, and they're looking at Celtic and they've gone, oh yeah, them pricks, and like they've become the sole focus. You know what I mean? But this is the thing. You talk about the goldfish bowl and the pressure. They've set foot back in this world. Whereas, how do you balance the expectation of maybe putting a sensible long-term plan in place, but also being so desperate to overhaul your rivals, and you've got to face them again, and you don't want to lose to your rivals week in, week out. Where do you think Rangers are going to go with this? Because they could potentially go for some short-term gain to try and knock Celtic back, stop them getting. I think they'll be on 6 titles at the moment.
So it'll be 6 titles this year. I think the big thing for Rangers fans is they don't want them to get the 9 in a row. Yeah. And so they've got a few years before that, so they've got time to plan and get it right.
But you get it, don't you? Like it's hard looking at your nearest rivals and being like, you've got to put up with Liverpool. When Liverpool is successful, it does your head in, and I guess vice versa, apparently. I don't remember that.
Can help himself. Try to think.
This segment for me.
Sorry,
Yeah, I can remember when you were looking up to us,
Exactly, yeah.
all those years ago. Yeah, obviously, as fans, we get carried away. Probably you should know that better than anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Celebrating the league in October or whatever it was. No, I think as fans, we do get carried away. It would have been, every Rangers fan winning the third division and they're just walking through it and beating teams every week, like you say. How can you stop that when you come into the Premier League? Because you're on that run. So you get back into the big time. You're up against better quality than what you've been facing anyway. Without having big money to go out and bring half a dozen top-class players in, that again drags you closer to Celtic. It's hard to say to 40, 50,000 Rangers fans, this year, if we finish in the top 3 or 4, we've done all right, because they're thinking, like you say, you get back in, all of a sudden, the elephant in the room isn't white anymore. It's there, isn't it? It's right in front of your face going, we're winning titles, doing this, that and the other. It's hard to then go, well, why can't we go toe-to-toe with them? We beat them, like you said, last year in the Cup. Why can't they get closer to them? Okay, you could argue they've underperformed a little bit because the gap, did you say it was 27 points? So it's quite clearly, that's 9 wins, between the two teams.
But it's telling that without Celtic, it's quite close. Rangers are competitive for the rest of the league.
That's what we're saying. So they're probably where they should be, really, for this season maybe, because they are quite close to everybody else. Celtic have had the year after year doing the same thing, winning title after title, playing in the Champions League, that extra bit of money. Relatively speaking to what Celtic and Rangers used to be like, that money has been cut right down. Yeah. But where they are, it's still that gulf there at the moment.
There's an unfortunate balance, I think, of where they are, because there's the weight of expectation, the weight of history, which again, I get totally. Like, there's also that, like, you want to put if you can't compete financially, because you can't expect to come up unless you've got mega millions. And by looks, apparently they were, promised 30 million transfer kitty or whatever, which hasn't been forthcoming and whatever. If you're not guaranteed the financial clout, because look at Man United, you've had with the pressure of a massive job like that, like David Moyes wasn't capable of handling that thing, whereas he had a good level to some extent. We'll
never know if he was capable of handling it, will we? Because
didn't get given a chance.
Didn't really get given.
But that's a simple. This is
a different conversation. I could talk all day about this.
But again, look what like Man United have done this time around. They've gone right. We need to get back up there. We'll spend a load of dough to do it. It looks to me like Rangers need to put a plan in place. They need to do what they've done with Warburton, but they could do with finding a guy who is just a bit more capable of handling this. What you're talking about, the goldfish bowl scenario.
He's not going to
crawl. But what's the point of getting Frank de Boer if you can't bankroll him to?
Well, what difference would that make? Are they going to get close enough? Let's say, look at Juventus. Juventus got relegated, right? And how long did it take them to come back straight back to the top?
No, they were a slightly different example, but
it's a slightly different example, but
Fiorentina is the best example. But go on, yeah.
But it's the same kind of principle. It's not going to happen in the space of 6 months, is it? And and especially given the gulf between Rangers and Celtic now, if say Rangers throw £100 million at it, is that going to automatically get them there? It's not, is it? Yeah, let's be serious. They have to. You have to be thinking about 3 or 4 years down the line. They can't be today. I know it's hard for Rangers fans to take,
but they don't want to
have a massive fan base. But I mean, they have to accept that it's not going to happen just because they're back in the league now.
It's the problem.
Even if they throw the money at it, the gulf is still too big.
The problem is, I guess what you're almost saying to some extent as well with that league is that you're having to literally throw money away, because look at Celtic are not spending massive money comparatively. They're spending. They spent what $3.5 million for Scott Sinclair in the summer. Was their biggest buy.
Was it a decent amount?
What's they spend on Dembele?
Actually, it's probably cheaper than people.
It was technically it's like a tribunal or whatever, I think it was. But either way, you're talking. It's not like Celtic are spending what Fulham have been spending in the Championship, in recent years and stuff like that. So I get it from Rangers' perspective, because we've been looking at the players they brought in the summer. They did the champ manager thing. They went down and went, we'll go and get a load of filter by international caps or Premier League experience. Who interested? Yes, Philip Senderos, Joey Barton. You could make a case, James, to some extent that they could expect more from what they've got, because they've bought some experienced players in there. They're there or thereabouts. If they had a better manager, could De Boer have actually got? Could he get more out of what he's got available to him?
Well, I think
But Gary Rowett either.
Gary Rowett could be an option. I mean, Warburton, his general philosophy was to have quite a small squad and use the loan system, use it really well. And so one of the other things that made it sort of writing on the wall was he wanted Reece Oxford on loan, but they didn't sort of have the funds to do it. But I agree with you. I think they've gone backwards in terms of where they are because of the players they bought. Their best signing this year out of their players is a 38-year-old Clint Hill. Now, I love Clint Hill, but if you're looking to bridge that gap, you've got to have those other guys that they bought, Rossiter, who apparently has just gone missing. They can't even find the guy. Those players, Josh Windass, they haven't done it for them. So he's got it wrong there. Moving forward to a manager, you've got the option of, do you have a safe pair of hands in Mcleish, who's been there and done it, but it's going to be a little bit boring? Do you go for a Gary Rowett? Gary Rowett was at Birmingham, went into a situation that was really, really difficult. There were constraints financially, so he had to find decent young players like Damari Gray and other guys, and a few decent loan signings and get a good team there.
Sorry, can I just
for him to go in that goldfish bowl.
Could it
be similar to
Can
Warburton?
I just ask then, so this is all on the pretense that you think that it's the manager's fault that Rangers aren't in line with Celtic? Because what you're saying is you're bringing in a better manager. Let's say you bring in, just for talk's sake, Jose Mourinho, right? You think Mourinho's going to bridge that gap because he's a better manager?
Comparing it to Celtic this year is wrong. Comparing it to Aberdeen and Hearts this year is where you should be comparing. And they've got the same amount of points.
But Rangers
as
won't
Aberdeen.
accept that though, because the benchmark is always going to be Celtic.
I don't care what they think.
But
It's my opinion.
But
the gulf between them
But
they should be 6, 7, 8 points ahead of those guys for the money that they've spent.
The problem is there needs to be. I think there needs to be someone, whoever that is, has got to unify the thinking of that football club top down. Because let's be perfectly honest, whether Warburton was losing it and whether apparently he was being really touchy over stuff, and there were weird signs from him for a while that the writing was on the wall from him not being able to handle that job. The owners. All he asked for was Reece Oxford and £1 million to buy another player in January, and they refused that, and then they're booting him after the fact. The owners and the chairman have a responsibility to that football club as much, and they've fucked their own club there, because if you're not going to back him, sack him, get someone else in. And look, if you think the squad's good enough, then get someone else in who you think can get more out of the squad, or get someone else in who you think can spend the money better. But don't leave it till February when you've left yourself with no option whatsoever. It's
the reason why I'm
bizarre.
saying the Boer is, though, he's been at Ajax, wasn't he? He's worked
he knows the club as well.
He knows that. He knows Rangers. He's been there before. He's also a manager that he will command respect because of his name.
That's a good point.
And they're in
I
it.
think Mcleish is the same.
Pardon?
Mcleish is the same in that
Not
regard.
like the
But
Boer,
Alex
like
Mcleish, I personally think his stock will have gone down a little bit. Where the Boer is, all right, he didn't have a great time at Inter, but he only lasted 14 games. But he's still done okay. He's done well at Ajax.
I think he's
titles
at Ajax.
He's a good manager. Rangers fans will identify with him. And don't forget, sometimes you need... I mean, we talk about the Northwest with the box office now, with Marino and Klopp and Koeman and Pep. That will give Rangers spotlight against someone like the Boer at the helm there. Okay, they're up against Celtic and Brendan Rodgers. As a better manager, will bridge the gap a little bit, because you can get that little bit more. Otherwise, anyone could manage anybody. It's just about players. Yeah. It's the fine line.
That's what I'm asking though. Is the gap that big because Rangers don't have the playing staff able to compete with Celtic, or is it because they don't have the manager?
Probably a little bit. It's probably a little bit of both.
Well, the thing is, though, in terms of mentality, there's putting a plan in place and saying, listen, we can't financially compete. Here's the realistic situation. We can't compete with Celtic, so we're going to have to put a plan in place, and we're going to look to do the loans. We'll get some canny buys in. We're going to build youth. It's going to take us 4 years, but we will stop. We believe this is the plan, and we're going to stop Celtic, and we're going to do it in a different way.
The biggest problem for them is the league, isn't it?
But the other option is, and again, just bring it back to the kind of our experience of things. You look at Newcastle as an example. Newcastle's a Premier League club of. You get big names in the hope that just being a big name is enough for you, and that's the problem. And that's where I think Rangers, it's tough. I think the fans almost have to work out which they want most. Do they want the year on year, every 2 years, having a bit of a gamble at something where this looks great on paper and we can get behind and we can wave some flags because we've got a guy who we're all buzzing to have in charge? Or do we go, right, we totally believe in this that's been put in place, and we put faith in the fact that this is gonna bear fruit over the long term? It's a difficult situation, and again, it mirrors what Liverpool have had over the years and what we had actually with Brendan Rodgers to us. You get a guy in there who's got a plan, he's got an ethos, but he doesn't really have the experience to be at your football club. But when that starts to fall apart, it falls apart big time.
And that's why I would think that Gary Rowett is a risk probably not worth taking. Whereas Frank de Boer's the dream one, and the fans will love it. But how much is he going to cost?
And is he going to
go into that?
Yeah.
And would he even go? He hasn't ruled it out, but that would be the dream one for them.
Yeah.
I actually think, and a lot of Premier League fans, English Premier League fans, would think Mcleish and they roll their eyes because the football that we saw his teams play was boring as hell.
He knows the league and knows the club.
He knows the club.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like a Holloway for QPR, who other people see as sometimes a bit of a joke. We've got a guy that we love and believe in, who we know gets it. And Mcleish, I think, might be the safer option, and also have a lot of contacts for players who could actually bridge that gap, because they only play Celtic, was it 4 times a year, whatever it is?
Times a year.
They've just got to beat all the other guys a lot.
Yeah, no, that's true. And that's exactly it, isn't it? No, it's an interesting one though. Obviously, the battle for the long-term future of Rangers kind of began at the start of the season. It's not gone spectacularly, but I'll be honest. I've looked into it loads, in the build-up to this video. I've not really done. I was surprised how well Rangers have been doing comparatively. I thought you expect a team to come up with struggle a bit to find the feet in a higher division, and I think it's testament that they are in that mini league for the Europa League places almost, with the likes of Aberdeen.
But let's be serious.
They're not miles off, but they do need to find something to unify the fan base long term.
Competition isn't exactly tip top though, is it?
No, I know, Liam, but that's the competition. That's the competition that it is, and the size of that football club. They need to find a way to make themselves competitive with Celtic again. Because what's the point? They might as well go back to the Championship and go back to being the best team.
A bigger
in that
issue
league,
is whether them two should be in that league as
well. Exactly.
But
that's another story.
Until the cards come home, that one, isn't it?
Let us know your thoughts on the Rangers situation in the comments below. Rangers fans in particular, I'd be very interested to know your opinions on the Warburton thing. Would you have kept him till the end of the season if nothing else? And then obviously from the candidates we've discussed, would you take a punt on a Rowett, or would you like the safe hands of a Mcleish, or dream scenario, someone like a Frank de Boer? Let us know in the comments below. Click the Ball Street emblem to subscribe, and if you want some phenomenal football, watch Ball Street FC versus Creators FC. It's a decent standard. You'll understand.